True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick.
The family portrayed on social media by Jennifer Hart seemed perfect. She and her wife Sarah were a progressive and loving couple with 6 adopted black children. Pictures on Facebook showed 2 moms giving their disadvantaged children a better life. Never mind that the pictures looked very posed and the children were rail thin. Real life for the Hart children was actually far from perfect. A trail of abuse followed the family from Minnesota to Oregon to Washington until Jennifer Hart drove the family's SUV off of a California cliff. Join us at the quiet end for the Hart family tragedy. This is a case that is a disturbing example of unchecked child abuse, failures in the foster care and adoption system, and a society that doesn't value children enough to intervene on their behalf. In the final analysis, Jen and Sarah Hart were responsible for the children's deaths. But that certainly doesn't mean that there was no way this tragedy could have been prevented. And what have we got for a beer today, Dick?
We have a beer from one of my favorite California breweries. It's called The Brewery, and the beer is called MASH. This is an English barley wine. It's 12.5% alcohol by volume, so it's definitely a sipper. The beer is a pretty red color, kind of ruby red, little tiny tan head. Nice aroma of biscuit, caramel, burnt sugar, and oak. The taste is wonderful. Caramel, toffee, little biscuity, vanilla, and some alcohol, which is hardly noticeable. This is just a big, beautiful beer. Enjoy it.
I really can't wait to try it. I've never had this one. Have you had this one before?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you like it. All right, well, let's open it up. Ooh, it is pretty. Smells good, too.
I thought you'd like that.
Yeah. Well, hey, why don't you bring it over here to the quiet end of our spare bedroom?
Okay. I'll move it 10 feet or so.
Yeah, now this is a case, actually, that I've been following since it happened. When I heard about it, I was quite shocked, as most people were. But, what really didn't shock me is the whole social media aspect, because, I'm not a real fan of social media. It's something that I do a little bit of for the podcast, but I'm not really a sharer on Facebook and all the other social media.
That's an understatement.
Well, I just feel like it can be very exploitive, especially to children, and here we go.
Well, of course it can be.
So I think that there's a fine line between sharing some cute things your kids did with some friends online and exploiting children. And I feel like Jen Hart went over that line and actually fooled a lot of people.
Yeah, she did. I mean, I think if you just watch the documentary and hear all the friends, Facebook friends that are talking about her, you can see that there's a little bit of bias.
Oh, yeah. It makes you want to throw up, to be honest. But why don't we go ahead? We'll start from the beginning and go over this case for people who haven't heard about it before.
Let's do that. So Jen Hart and Sarah Gangler both lived in small towns in South Dakota while they were growing up. Jen was an oldest child. She had a little brother. From a young age, she was a leader, a caretaker. She really liked being in control. Jen was from Huron, South Dakota. Sarah was from Big Stone City, South Dakota. They met in college at Northern State University in Aberdeen. Now, Jen didn't graduate, and she had been arrested once for shoplifting. 2002, Sarah did graduate with a degree in special education.
Right, so I think Jen had gone to another college for a couple of years, maybe a junior college? Not sure which one. And then she went to the university and still didn't graduate. So I think from the beginning here, Jen is the one that has more issues. And she continues to be the one with more issues, it seems. Although I'm not going to let Sarah off the hook either.
Okay. As we said, they are a couple. So before they became a couple, or became known as a couple, they called each other friends or roommates. Once they had come out, Sarah claimed that their families and friends were critical of them or actually disowned them. And then in 2001, Jen actually stopped speaking with her side of the family. As we said, once she was angry, she knew how to hold a grudge. Jen always said that she was disowned because she was a lesbian, but her family would deny that. They said that they would support her and didn't mind that she was gay. For whatever reason, Jen and Sarah isolated themselves from everyone and moved to Alexandria, Minnesota. And there they both took jobs at Herberger's, which is a large department store in the town.
Yeah, so Jen was the more outspoken of these two, and she worked in the juniors department. And coworkers described her as funny, but maybe a bit caustic. Jen liked to break the rules and get attention. And once she complained about the nipples on the store's female mannequins being sexist. So she took a hacksaw to them and removed them, which was of course destruction of property, didn't go over well. And I don't know if that's because the male mannequins didn't have nipples. I thought they did, and most of them that I've seen.
Yeah, I'm not sure just from looking at this at face value what the problem is, unless there were no nipples on the men either.
Could be. But Sarah seemed to balance things out, and she was more compliant with the rules and very focused on succeeding in her job. I mean, even though it was just retail, she did want to become management. So when Jen and Sarah were in their mid-20s in 2004, that's when they took in a 15-year-old black girl as a foster child. They applied to be certified as foster parents when a friend was having problems with the teen in their care, and Jen and Sarah decided they would be a placement home for this girl. It's a little unusual for people so young, I would think.
Mid-20s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot to take on. Of course, we know they'll take on a lot more than that. But actually, they didn't treat this girl very well, it would turn out.
No, according to people who worked with the couple, Jen and Sarah began complaining about the girl almost immediately. Now, it really disturbed their friends to hear them criticize the girl, saying she ate out of the garbage and things like that. And according to Minnesota Child Welfare, the girl had adjustment problems with the Harts after being in their care for a few months. One of the breaking point issues, get this, was that the girl used wire hangers. And this is something that Jen didn't want her to do for who knows what reason, but she used wire hangers.
Yeah, I read about the wire hangers, and I said, that just seems too much like Mommy Dearest, right? Yeah. The movie about Joan Crawford, no right. Wire hangers. But actually, if you look at the Minnesota DHS records, it's true. It's in black and white that was an issue. But it really seems like they're in their mid-20s, this girl's in her teens. It was almost like Mean Girls picking on her. So, even though the girl had some high hopes, it turned bad. In an interview with this girl, who's now a grown woman in her 20s, she said that Jen was the one who she argued with the most. And over time, their disputes became more and more frequent. And it was all over minor things, she remembered. So one day, the three of them went to Lambeau Field for a Green Bay Packers game, and they brought footballs hoping to have them signed by a famous running back, Ahman Green. And Jen was really a big fan. And when they approached Green after the game holding up their footballs, Green only signed the teens' football, which I think is pretty normal, right? They're going to respond more to a child than an adult.
Well, sure.
But Jen really held this against the girl, apparently, and wouldn't talk to her for days, was mad at her about it, saying she was hogging all the attention.
Aye.
Yeah, very immature and, I don't know, could we say narcissistic at this point?
Maybe.
Or selfish, at least.
Yes.
So in later years, people would say that the Hart children were kept isolated, aside from music festivals and rallies that they did together. And this girl could relate to that. She said she was upset a lot because she couldn't leave the house to go see friends or do anything unless she was going to her job or going to school. When she asked the couple if she could see friends, it was always a no. She always had homework or chores to do. And also, the Harts told her that she had a home with them until she went to college. But then they really just dumped her without any discussion. One day they dropped her off at a therapist's office and never came back for her. So as you can imagine, this was really traumatic and hurtful. And she's already been a foster child and gone from place to place. and then they just dumped her. She thought she finally had a home. So she was devastated because they'd been telling her that they were bringing home 3 younger foster siblings, so she'd have a real family. She'd be a big sister. Then before these other children moved in, they just got rid of her.
Yeah, so what did they do? They just figured that she wasn't in their plans anymore? She didn't fit in with this new family?
It's really hard to say. I would suppose, but I think there's just a real darkness there that nobody knew about. And it was already there at that point. There's something dark here.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
I mean, just the dealings with this 15-year-old. I mean, holy cow.
It's a bad sign.
Yep. And in 2006, Jen and Sarah took in 3 siblings through the Texas foster system. Marcus was 7, Hannah was 4, and Abigail was 2. Now, these kids were considered hard to place because they needed to be placed together and because they were black.
Yeah, apparently there's just so many black children in the system that it's harder to find placement for them. And they had turned to placing them, I guess, with just about anybody, I'd have to say, because these 2 don't seem equipped. So there's really a flaw in the system there that we can see right away. But Jen did quit her job to be a full-time mom, and this left Sarah as the sole breadwinner. But she didn't make a ton of money. But they did also get some adoption subsidies each month. So you get money from the foster care system when you take care of foster children. And of course their health insurance and all that is covered. And then even after they adopted them, because they were foster children, they continued to get money until they were 18.
Right.
Which is something I didn't know. I knew for foster children you did get expense money, but I didn't know about after the adoption that could happen.
Yeah, see, we learned something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after they took these kids in, Jen became very active on Facebook. And 10 years later, she posted about her first night as a mother of 3. Now in this post, Jen's very dramatic. She's describing multiple issues with the children. Abigail urinated everywhere and gashed her chin by falling down the stairs. Hannah smeared feces on the wall and gorged herself with food until she needed the Heimlich and had episodes of projectile vomiting. Marcus, she said, hit his head on a closet wall and in multiple voices claimed to be possessed by demons. But she and Sarah, at least according to her Facebook post, were committed to healing the kids over time. If not us, who? She wrote.
Yeah, so excuse me, ma'am, but you're really setting yourself up as a martyr, right?
Yeah, and you also got to remember this was posted 10 years later when the kids were teens.
Right, which is even worse.
Right? I mean, if they saw this post, it would be pretty humiliating for them.
Sure, I mean, you're basically an expert on teenagers. So can you see how this would affect them if their peers saw that?
Oh, you'd be mortified.
Yeah, it's their whole world, really, would be shattered by that. Plus, I mean, why does anyone need to know that unless you're trying to build yourself up to look like a martyr?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, at the very least, Jen was oversharing.
Well, yeah, and at worst, she's making some big exaggerations or even lies.
Yes.
Yes. But not long after that, Sarah and Jen had a photo of their family of 5 on an adoption agency site. And now they were asking to take in up to 3 more children of any ethnicity up to 8 years old. So they would take in 5-year-old Devontae and his younger siblings, Jeremiah, 4, Sierra, 3. And this was in the spring of 2008. Sierra, Devontae, and Jeremiah had become wards of the state in 2005, along with their older brother Dante, who I believe was 10. Their mom, Sherry Davis, had this long-standing drug issue, and she was addicted to crack cocaine at the time. The state had documented several instances of neglect by Sherry, so it's believed by everyone involved that removing the children was probably the correct decision, at that point at least. Sherry had lost custody of her 2 boys in 2004 when they were infants, and both boys went to live with Sherry's husband, Nathaniel Davis. Nathaniel loved these kids even though they weren't biologically his, and even though he was on disability, he did use what little money he had to take decent care of them. But then when Sierra was born in 2005, the Texas authorities took all 3 children. And Nathaniel Davis would say it's because of his relationship with Sherry that they believed he might leave them alone with Sherry, or, she had too much control in that situation, and she was losing custody.
Yeah, so I guess from the Department of Social Services standpoint, they didn't want Sherry anywhere near these kids.
Yeah, which I'm not sure if that's fair. I can see that she probably was not able to care for them, but
Sure.
I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe they still could have some kind of relationship with their mother, some kind of supervised visitation. I don't know. It just seems like the efforts really weren't put into keeping a family together, or at least keeping them connected. It was more like, let's take these kids away and give them to this nice white lesbian couple. So I'm not sure where that all came from. But it might be the way the system is, or was at that point, although I have no evidence that it's improved. So over the next 18 months, the Texas Child Welfare Services placed the children in foster homes and shelters. And then in June of 2006, Priscilla Celestine agreed to take them in. So Priscilla, the sister of Jeremiah and Sierra's father, filed a petition to adopt the children in May of 2007. She even moved into a bigger home, and she was able to provide clothing and toys for them. She had a steady job. She wasn't into drinking or using drugs at all. Basically, she was home unless she was at work or at church. No criminal record whatsoever. Priscilla was a little older. She was 56 years old when the 4, 3, and 2-year-old children moved in with her. But she said having the kids around gave her energy and kept her young and active. But then she made a poor decision. And this decision made by Priscilla just 6 months after getting custody changed everything. And she was never given a second chance.
Yeah, she had been called in for an extra shift at work, and she didn't have childcare arrangements. So she left the children with their mother, which is a no-no. And by chance, a social worker visited the house that day and saw that the children were in the care of Sherry Davis. So we've broken the rules. Now, later, Priscilla would claim that she didn't know it was a violation. Nevertheless, that very same day, Sierra, Devante, and Jeremiah were taken into state custody.
So I will concede that Priscilla clearly made a mistake, but I also wonder if the state's response was too much. Maybe they could have given her a warning? What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure how the service is run, but it seems to me they have a relative caring for these kids. It's a pretty stable home. They've been there for several months. They seem to be acclimating pretty nicely. It seems like a quick decision to take them and not give them back, or not give her a second chance or anything.
Right. I feel like there could have been a warning or some education, or maybe some more childcare resources given to this woman. But then on the other hand, did they just happen to come on a day when Sherry was watching them, or is this something that Priscilla had done before? We're not sure.
No, we're not.
Because in my experience, you don't just catch someone doing something the one time they do it. There's usually, it's happened before, although I obviously have no evidence of that. But I still think that this quick and dramatic response was very different from the responses to future abuse complaints against the Harts.
Yeah, wasn't it?
Yeah, so was this difference because Priscilla was black and the Harts were white? A lot of people think so. And I certainly can believe it was at least part of it.
It could be. I mean, if they had this nice young couple who already are adoptive parents of 3 kids wanting to adopt some more.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely wrong. I think that the main goal is supposed to be to preserve the family, if possible. So if a relative wants to take care of them, I think every opportunity should have been given for that.
One would think.
And Priscilla did care quite a bit about them. She didn't give up. She hired a lawyer and she fought for custody. But the state of Texas was moving right along looking to find a family to adopt these 3 younger children. So they said the oldest, Dante, wasn't adoptable because he needed placement in a mental health treatment center. And this is according to Priscilla's attorney. However, other articles I've read have said that the Harts didn't want the older boy. Because remember, they'd said on the website they wanted children 8 and younger, and Dante was at least 10 at that point. At the same time, he did have some issues, so that's uncertain.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, they had the issues with the teenager, and they didn't want an older kid.
Sure. And I can see a lot of that's control. Because, once kids are 12 or 13, it's really hard to maintain that control. Most of them are going to rebel.
Sure, at least to some extent.
Right. Well, and kids that have had issues and been through foster care are more likely to have issues as they get older.
Absolutely.
So only a small percentage of adoptions are across state lines. And when it does happen, a caseworker in the state where the adopting family lives has to do like a home study and review the adoptive parents' criminal histories, their daily lives, and their employment, how they're paying their bills. Then child welfare agencies in both states have to approve the placement. It shocked me, Dick, to find out that there's no federal oversight on out-of-state adoptions. Are you shocked by that, or did you know that?
No, I didn't know that, but I don't think that's a huge big deal, as long as things are done state by state appropriately.
Yeah, but if the states aren't communicating properly, right?
Well, then you have a problem.
Then you have a big problem. And federal funding for each state's child welfare systems are in part based on how quickly they move children out of the foster care system and into adoption. To me, that's a huge red flag.
Yes, it is.
They're going to get more money if they rush these kids into an adoption.
Yeah.
Not good. So after placement, there's also very little follow-up. Once the kids are adopted, it's just like, okay, success.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Check them off.
There's really no data collected about success and failure in these adoptions, which is another thing that kind of blew my mind. Just seems like a big shit show.
Doesn't it? Now, the Family Resource Center was a small adoption agency in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. They claimed to specialize in adoptions of sibling groups and children of color. And according to a report filed by the Minnesota Department of Human Services, the Family Resource Center was put on conditional status after 17 licensing violations. And this action was taken just a matter of months after the Harts had adopted the 3 children. And one of the violations was a failure to do proper background checks on families. So once Texas had begun working on placement of the children with this agency, the process had moved swiftly.
And I'd have to say too swiftly.
Well, haphazardly?
Yeah, and what about Priscilla, their aunt?
Yeah.
Who did nothing wrong, really. She made one mistake, but it's not like she was abusive or neglectful. She wanted to go to work. So within 6 months of being taken out of Priscilla's home, the siblings were moved to Minnesota. So while their adoption by the Harts was still pending, but they're living with them as foster children, in September of 2008, Hannah Hart told one of her school teachers that Jennifer had hit her with a belt. She had a large bruise on one of her arms, and this was the first allegation of abuse that is documented against the Harts. The Harts told the school that Hannah had fallen down the stairs, and no charges were filed. So after this, the Harts took all 6 children out of school for about a year, and then they did re-enroll them the following fall.
So they were allegedly homeschooled?
Allegedly.
For this year?
And you know how I feel about that. I'm sure there's some great homeschoolers, but I really think that we have seen several abusers say they're homeschooling their children, so they have no oversight, right? There's no mandatory reporters seeing these kids on a regular basis.
Right. They can get away with more.
Right. And I'm sure that's the rare case, but still, they never registered to be doing homeschooling at all.
No, they just said, we're going to homeschool.
Yep. So despite the abuse allegation, the adoption went through of Devontae, Jeremiah, and Sierra, and it was approved. This was February of 2009. Then Jen and Sarah went on a trip to Connecticut and got legally married because same-sex marriage wasn't legal in the state of Minnesota at that time.
Now, in Houston, when Priscilla got the news of the adoption, she was devastated. So she asked for information on the children's placement, and she wanted to know about the background checks done on the adoptive parents. To each request, she was told that the information was confidential and was not going to be shared with her.
Yeah, so listen, I really am not a fan of the closed adoption. Why not have an open adoption? Why not let these kids have a little contact with their aunt? Their aunt's not a drug addict. They're just tearing them away from the whole family, not to mention Dante, who's lost all of his siblings. For good,
Yeah.
No contact at all. So that kid had to be, just really messed up by all this. That poor kid. Early on, relatives and acquaintances of the Harts were seeing issues. right? The children rarely spoke. Some described them as robotic and afraid. If the kids stepped out of line at all, Jennifer would put them in the corner, and she began withholding food as punishment. And then anyone who questioned her parenting, she would just immediately cut out of their lives. And that's how she operated, right? She holds a grudge. You do anything she doesn't like, boom, you're out.
You're out.
Yep.
But she would then claim that the person had rejected her because they were homophobic or racist or whatever.
Yeah, and of course I'm not denying that homophobia or racism exist. Of course they do. But some of the stories she came out with, which kind of seemed to just be to excuse her behavior, I think she made them up. She made up some stories about that. According to her family, they were quite accepting of her coming out.
Yeah, while she tells a completely opposite story.
Completely different. Really something to get sympathy too, you know? It's all about her getting sympathy and attention, and it just sickens me.
So in November of 2010, teachers saw signs of abuse with 6-year-old Abigail. She had multiple bruises on her body, and CPS was notified. Abigail told the investigators that Jen had held her head under cold water and punched her because she thought that Abigail had stolen a penny.
Yeah.
A penny, for crying out loud.
Found a penny on her and decided she must have stolen it and pretty much beat the shit out of her.
Yeah, now the police interviewed all of the Hart children. They did admit that they were often spanked, they were often not given food, and they were often grounded up in their rooms.
Yeah, for like hours. Don't leave your bed for 5 hours or whatever, which is just excessive and cruel. So the Alexandria schools reported 6 incidents to the Department of Human Services, including that the Hart children were asking other students for their food, and they were also seen rummaging through trash barrels for something to eat. So there's a huge red flag.
I guess. What are we going to get out of that? Nothing.
Nothing. I mean, Sarah claimed that she was the one who had hit Abigail, even though the child said that Jen had done it. And Sarah was convicted of misdemeanor domestic assault and was sentenced to 1 year of probation and 1 year of community service with a 90-day suspended jail sentence. But you know what? There was no follow-up. It wasn't monitored.
No.
Nobody was concerned for their safety. After this, all of the kids were taken out of school permanently, and Jen said she was going to homeschool them. So if I was at the school, I would be very alarmed by that.
Well, yeah, there's something with that, right?
Well, why would you convict her and then still let her have these adopted children with no supervision? You know, what about supervision, therapy, checking in, something?
Well, it was nothing.
No, so now they're out of school, and now they're isolated and completely vulnerable to these adoptive parents. Jen primarily, and she took the children on frequent trips to music festivals and nature reserves, posting these inspiring, in quotation marks, photos of these happy-looking children on Facebook, just painting this ideal picture that people were buying.
Yeah, and Jen told people she had taken the kids out of school because they were being bullied. She told stories of racial bias against the kids, and those seemed at the very least to be exaggerated.
I think so.
Jen just seemed to be very attention-seeking. On the other hand, Sarah was described as the quiet one. She didn't talk about her family a lot while she was at work, but she did mention that Jen was the full-time mother, and she was tired after work but would have to take over the care of the children in order to give Jen a break. So there sounds like there's some tension going on between the two of them also.
Sure. Because it seems like Sarah was working a lot of overtime and there was a lot of financial stress. But another thing that disturbs me is that Jen was into this online video game, which she would play for hours a day. And not only did she play, she was like, I don't know, the leader of their chat groups and things. She was kind of really involved in it more than just playing. So she spent hours talking to those people online and playing that game, and she's supposed to be this wonderful full-time homeschooling mother. It's not possible.
Not if you're playing the game for hours on end.
Exactly, right. So the whole Facebook pictures are bullshit. And, I know I have the benefit of hindsight here, because if I look at the pictures, I can certainly see how staged they are. But that's not the end of things, because the Harts moved from Minnesota in 2013 and rented a house in West Lynn, Oregon, which is a Portland suburb. And nothing was said by the Department of Human Services in Minnesota. They didn't contact Oregon. They didn't follow up on any of this.
Yeah, they might not have even known
about
the move until they went to visit at the home or something.
Yeah, I don't think they were making visits, though, unfortunately.
So despite the mishap, I say mishap facetiously, but despite that mishap in Minnesota.
The child abuse?
Right, and the involvement of social services, nothing got conveyed to Portland authorities or to Oregon authorities.
No. So they rented this house, which was pretty isolated out in the country. They did have some next-door neighbors nearby, but they had quite a bit of land. They had goats and chickens in the yard. And Sarah got another job in retail, and Jen continued to be the full-time mother.
And now most people knew the family strictly from social media or if they attended the same festivals. People who spent any real time with the family would notice some red flags. There was one friend of the family who told a story about how each child was only allowed one piece of pizza for their dinner. The next morning, the leftover pizza had been gobbled up mysteriously in the night, so Jen accused the children of stealing it.
Now, how do you steal food from your own house, right?
Well, maybe it was for her.
It's heartbreaking.
So she withheld breakfast from all the kids, made them lie in bed with sleeping masks on for 5 hours. And there are also claims that the children appeared to be malnourished.
How long is 5 hours for a young child?
For a 6-year-old or 8-year-old?
Yeah, it's forever.
It's forever.
Yeah, it's just so cruel. And this was because somebody was so damn hungry they snuck down and ate the pizza.
Yeah.
So it's horrible. Then in July of 2013, there were 2 former Friends of the Hearts who did call the Oregon Department of Human Services. And they described that Jen treated the children like animals and was kind of acting like she was their savior. When social workers followed up on the complaints, they really had trouble getting an interview date with Jen and Sarah. So they were kind of being avoided for a while.
That they were. The first visit, a CPS worker and a police detective showed up at the house. They noticed that there were 2 cars or 2 vehicles in the driveway that had Minnesota plates, but no movement was noted inside the house. No one answered their knocks at the door. So they left a card with a note asking them to contact them. Then a few hours later, the detective drove by the home again. He noted that one of the vehicles was gone from the driveway. Then later, the CPS worker received a message from Sarah Hart saying that she had found the card when she went out to take the trash. And the worker notified Sarah of the allegations against her and Jen and explained the process of a DHS assessment.
Yes, I guess Sarah said meeting wasn't a problem, but that Jen and the children were away at one of these festivals. She told them that the family was vegetarian and maybe more slender than other families, but denied that the children were malnourished. She said that Hannah was very petite, but she had her growth hormones checked and there was no problem. And Sarah said that the children were not home, but she'd call Jen and find out when they'd be back. So after nearly a month of this, 2 social workers visited the family at their home. And as they entered the home, they found all 6 of the children sitting at the kitchen table coloring. And when they explained that each child needed to be interviewed individually, Jen and Sarah seemed pretty hesitant about that. They did agree to it, but they wanted to be interviewed together as a couple. Now, I'm sure they had had a discussion with these kids prior to this assessment of what they were allowed to say and what they shouldn't say.
Oh, positively.
It would be so horrible. Just think of the things they could threaten these children with, separating them, you know?
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Be very effective on those kids.
So Marcus was 15 years old at the time of this assessment. He was in the 9th grade and, homeschooled. He said he was grateful to Jen and Sarah for changing his life. He said he had previously been abused in foster care. He said he thought there was more opportunity for him in Oregon and he was contributing to the world. He discussed that the family attended these musical festivals and went on trips, and that's how they had fun. Now, what the worker did note was that Marcus was very soft-spoken and reserved. The former friends who had contacted CPS had described Marcus as a targeted child by Jen, who was receiving more discipline than the others. The former friend had reported that Jen once told her that Marcus had tried to kill her and that Devante had saved her. So Jen and Sarah had reported that Marcus had come to them on psychotropic medications, but now he no longer needed them.
Now, if you listen to what you just said, on the one hand, he doesn't need his meds anymore, according to Jen. On the other hand, Jen said that Marcus had tried to kill her.
Sure, but this is all part of her martyr thing, right? Because
Boy.
He was just horrible when he came, and now he's just fine. She's fixed him.
Yep, she sure has. Now, at the time of the assessment, Hannah was 11. She was also very small for her age, and she had no front teeth. Now, the Harts reported that Hannah had knocked out her 2 front teeth when she was running, and she fell face first on a hardwood floor. And this happened about a year previously. Hannah said that she had seen a dentist, but was told that she needed to wait until she was 17 or 18 to get a retainer with teeth implants. So here's this little tiny kid anyway, and she's missing her front teeth. She makes her look even younger than she actually is.
Right. And I'm no scientist, I'm no dentist, but they are able to do that at different stages.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. So that was bullshit too.
Now, Hannah's medical records showed her to be well below the growth chart, but was otherwise healthy. And despite her history with the Minnesota branch of the CPS, Hannah denied any abuse by the Harts.
Right, but she had complained of abuse when she was in school years earlier.
Right.
So Devante was now 10 years old, and he was definitely the most talkative and outgoing child. Devante was small as well, though, and not on the growth chart for his age. But his doctor, the same doctor as Hannah's and Marcus's, noted no concerns about his health. And of course he denied any abuse by Jen or Sarah. Abigail, 9 years old, was also small, but her health report said there were no health concerns. She was noted to be very quiet and showed very little emotion. Although Marcus and Hannah had been reported to be the targeted children in the family, remember Abigail had had several reports of neglect and abuse when they were in Minnesota. She was reported that she had asked other children at school for food, and she had reported Jen hitting her head against a wall. She'd also been found with the bruises on her torso. She had also reported that Jen had put 2 hands around her throat and held her under cold water. And if you look at a picture of this child, this is a tiny child.
Yeah, she is.
And, these women were good-sized women. It's just very hard to believe that anyone could do that to this little child. And believe me, I know that you can lose your patience with kids. They can be tough. But you walk away, right? You don't do that. But despite this history, Abigail didn't mention any abuse during this interview with the CPS worker. Jeremiah, 9 years old, was the only of the Hart children to be on the growth chart when he was examined by the doctor. And he was again very quiet and denied any abuse. Sierra, 8 years old, was the youngest, and of course she made no complaints of abuse either. She had had a normal physical exam, except she also was below the growth chart for her age. So I'm going to have you talk to us a little bit about growth charts and malnourishment, because I think the doctor is wrong in not following up on this, saying that they didn't have any records from before.
Well, you need records. That's the first thing. You have to be able to have access to old records so you can look at growth charts and see how the kids have been growing. So being below average for growth by itself isn't a bad thing, as long as the growth is continuing. Or put it another way, if they're below the 5th percentile for growth, but they're paralleling the 5th percentile, there's less likelihood of there being a problem. Now, at the same time, if they're falling off the growth curve, getting further and further away from the 5th percentile, that usually indicates something's going on.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say then is the growth chart really isn't valid unless you can follow it over time.
Right. If you have a point in time, that doesn't give you any real information.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And they're going to measure height and weight for the growth chart. On the younger kids, up till 2 or so, you're also going to measure head growth, head circumference, so you can assess those 3 parameters, and you can follow along. So, again, it's essential to have old records, and it's essential to follow the kids at intervals. Now, typically what I would do with these kids is, depending on the age, see them anywhere from 2-month to 6-month intervals to assess their growth and go over things. If you're falling off the curve, that's when you start evaluating. So you're going to do some basic studies, like a blood count, chemistry profile, urinalysis, things like that. You mentioned on one of the kids that she had growth hormones tested. And I have no idea. I mean, if you simply do a random growth hormone sample, it's going to be low because growth hormones secreted in kind of a pulsatile manner. So if you measure growth hormone, unless you happen to hit one of those pulses, you're going to get a low value. So typically what you have to do to assess growth hormone reserve is to stimulate production of growth hormone. Most commonly, you give the child some insulin. Don't freak out. You're not trying to make them hypoglycemic. You're just trying to make the blood sugar drop a little bit, which causes growth hormone to be secreted. So the protocol used to be administering some insulin and measuring growth hormone at 30-minute intervals for a couple hours. And you can assess how well they make growth hormone. But you can't just simply do a random growth hormone sample and have any credence with that.
Well, that's why I kind of feel like that Jen was just making that up off the cuff. Because it wasn't in any of the documentation of the medical records, as far as I could tell.
Not that I could see.
No. So let's talk a little bit about Jen and Sarah's interview, which they did together with the worker. In her interview, Jen claimed to have a degree in education. We know she didn't graduate college. She talked about being very involved in the music festival community and said that she traveled with the children for several months a year. Now, she said she was a vegetarian and tried to eat only organic food. And that would be one of the excuses for the children being slender. So I'm going to tell you right now, as a vegan, I can get plenty fat, right? If I want to put on a few extra pounds, it's no problem for me. I don't have to eat meat or dairy or any of that.
No, I mean, if you're trying to blame diet, unless you're starving, but if you're trying to blame diet for being underweight, it doesn't work.
No, and it's not that uncommon for children not to really like meat anyway.
No, but your point was that you can easily get sufficient calories from a vegetarian diet.
Yes, unfortunately, yes, for me. But seriously, for these kids, yes, they could have a plentiful vegetarian diet and be very well nourished and not be that thin and probably grow better.
Probably. So your thinking is that they were just not getting the food.
Absolutely. And I don't know if Child Protective Services has access to their own doctor, but that would be helpful, or nutritionist, something, because that might have helped. But anyway.
Well, kids like this would definitely need to be seeing a nutritionist.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't have any of that.
So Jen said that she believed in homeschooling and naturopathic medicine, which I know you're a big fan of that.
Don't get me started.
And she was adamant that most of the issues with the family were just from others not understanding their alternative lifestyle, which is complete bullshit. Because anyone who brought up, why are the kids so thin? Are they eating right? Boom, they're cut out of their life.
They're cut out.
Yep.
So at Jen's request, the two women were interviewed together. And as you might have expected, Jen dominated the conversation. And she did come across as kind of manipulative and controlling. She said that she did not have a relationship with her brother or mother because of disagreements over parenting. She also admitted to cutting friends and family out of their lives when confronted with parenting concerns. She said that living in Oregon was her lifelong dream. She didn't work, but she did receive about $2,000 a month in adoption assistance. Jeremiah and Marcus also received some Social Security benefits. Jen said she did not drink at all, and she denied drug abuse.
Yeah, so Sarah, of course, didn't come across as being as passionate about their lifestyle as Jen did, but she did agree to all of it. She agreed that she believed in homeschooling and an organic diet, and although she did have a degree in education, she was working in retail full-time. So because she worked a lot, she wasn't able to travel with Jen and the kids most of the time. She had admitted to being responsible for Abigail's abuse, but she became emotional about it and had a difficult time discussing it. She only said that things had gotten out of control.
I guess so. So overall, the children had given pretty much identical answers to the questions they were asked. The only one that seemed animated and having some emotion was Devante. Their doctor had seen each child for a checkup and had reported no concerns. Family history and previous medical records were not made available. So as we were talking about, the doctor had only this 1 point on the growth chart. But these children had been in a foster care system, and they had been adopted. So we know that medical records had to exist. And that asks the question, why didn't their pediatrician or DHS take action to get these records?
Right, exactly. It would seem important. I mean, especially with these abuse claims and especially with the withholding food accusations.
It's essential.
Absolutely.
So Jen and Sarah said that they were being targeted because they were vegetarian and lesbian, and they had black high-risk children, and they lived in a small town. So they believed that their lifestyle was misunderstood, and the reason they'd moved to Oregon was to find a more supportive community.
Yeah, and I think the Portland community is pretty open.
Sure.
From what I've seen.
Everything I know about Oregon is from watching Portlandia. So
And they're very open.
they're very open.
In summary of the DHS assessment, the Hart children were found to have no identified safety threat that crossed the safety threshold criteria that they had. So this was despite the fact that they were completely dependent on these caregivers and weren't having any regular contact with mandatory reporters because they were homeschooled, which I think if they're being homeschooled, you need to be extra involved.
Well, we've talked about this before. Aren't you supposed to have inspections at intervals to make sure that the curriculum is being followed? And
Something. I don't know if you call it an inspection, but there is supposed to be, you're supposed to sign up.
there's supposed to be some contact.
There's criteria, sure. Now, the children's physician did agree to send the case manager information to monitor the family and have some follow-up physicals, but not for 6 months, which is kind of a long time. If you're starving, 6 months is a fuck of a long time.
Well, it is, but again, they're not infants. If they were under, say, 2 years of age, I would want to see them at 2 to 3 month intervals. The older kids, yeah.
But you're talking about kids that are not, meeting their growth.
Right.
If you throw in the abuse, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, and not having ever seen these kids before, I would want to see them sooner rather than 6 months for a follow-up visit.
And you'd want to get those damn records.
Gotta have the
that's
records.
essential, sure. So these social workers did have the right to implement an in-home safety plan, but chose not to, which is super disappointing. The Children's Center, which is a nonprofit intervention organization that is willing to consult in neglect and abuse cases, declined to follow up with the children. They found it unnecessary. So without DHS monitoring in a regular way, these kids were on their own with these adoptive parents, who are clearly abusive.
It would seem. I don't have any other explanation for it.
No. Well, I think one of the things that was mentioned by a caseworker in Minnesota was that these women did look normal. They seemed educated. They seemed to have it all together. And here we go about judging people, judging a book by a cover.
Right. And I know what you're saying. You've got these 2 women that are in their 20s, maybe early 30s by now.
Yeah.
Educated, well-spoken. Yeah.
Yeah, really, they're acting like these socially conscious, educated people. Jen's even lying about having a degree. So they're getting a lot of free passes, which Priscilla didn't get for sure.
No, she didn't. Now, over the years, Jen Hart had put together a social media campaign that portrayed the family as happy, healthy, and socially conscious. Her posts were photos and videos of the children at various festivals and on cross-country adventures, outdoors in nature. She wrote long rants about her thoughts and feelings and the challenges she faced as a progressive, non-traditional parent.
To me, that's just so attention-seeking.
No kidding.
And I guess people need some attention, fine, but to me, we're getting to the point of narcissism here.
Well, Jen certainly continued to use her family in order to get attention.
Sure, I think that was her whole reason for doing it, Dick. She adopted these kids to impress people.
Yeah, and she wants all these Facebook posts and media reports are to focus attention on her and how great she is.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
So in December 2014, Devante who had tears streaming down his face, was photographed hugging a white policeman at a Black Lives Matter protest in Portland. He wore a leather jacket and had a fedora on his head, and he had been carrying a free hug sign. Now this photo went viral, and it was shared all over the country and recognized as an example of racial unity. The policeman later told reporters that he'd said, "I'm sorry," to Devante and asked him for a hug.
So how do you feel about the free hug sign? Exploitive?
Yeah.
And they'd been having him do that for years. On his birthday, different events, free hugs. And, it really seemed like he was kind of terrified at this protest. The photo was seen by many as a symbol of racial healing, but others saw it as being very staged and fake. One photographer who was there noted that Devante had been crying before he approached the police officer. He'd been crying while he was with Jen and looked kind of afraid. So some people thought he looked like he was afraid to go over and she was coercing him to go to the officer and give him a hug because she's thinking, photo op.
Yeah, and Devante's thinking, I'm going to get hit again.
Right. Oh my God. It's just heartbreaking.
So TV shows contacted the family because they wanted Devante on as a guest. Jen refused. She said that she wanted to protect her son's privacy.
Isn't that a laugh?
Which is a laugh.
Yeah.
Now, many would see this as odd, right?
Right.
Since she was constantly sharing personal information and photos of her kids on social media. Many people, on the other hand, would respect Jen for not exploiting her kids. But she was. It was almost a daily event that she was exploiting her kids.
Yeah. So I think she's avoiding the TV and all that because there's something dark going on in that house more than we will ever know.
Yeah.
It was bad. So according to a coworker of Sarah's, Sarah had told her that the event had changed Jen, the event of the picture. And Jen claimed that after that she was getting death threats and she became extremely stressed. And then, how ironic, she warned her Facebook followers against posting photos of their children online. So in 2016, Jen wrote on Facebook, "We've come to realize that some think our lives are next to perfect. We're human and we struggle through life's obstacle course just like everyone else." Which, okay, that sounds fine to me. And then later that year, she did take a break from social media. But we don't know what was going on during that time with the family.
Nope, they've broken all contact.
Pretty much, yeah. Then she returned in 2017 with this post. And I'm going to read that for you. "This year slammed us hard." And she announced that the family had relocated to Woodland, Washington. She said that they would invite people out to visit when the time was right. But they never had people out to visit.
Yeah, and no mention of why they moved from Oregon to Washington.
No.
Just that they did. I mean, Oregon was supposed to be this great place where their alternative lifestyle wouldn't be a problem for them.
Well, Jen is one of these people who's burning bridges as she goes through life.
So it seems.
And she's taking these poor kids with her. And I don't know really what to say about Sarah at this point. I mean, maybe she's just emotionally crippled. It did seem like she really did love Jen. But Jen was definitely leading things and she was not doing anything to protect these kids. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for her. Or any, really.
No. In the late summer of 2017, and they're in Washington now, the Hart's next-door neighbors were Bruce and Dana DeKalb, and they were woken up at 1:30 in the morning to their doorbell ringing. Bruce opened the front door and he saw Hannah Hart standing there wrapped in a fleece blanket. She was pretty frantic, and she pleaded for Bruce to hide her. She said, "They whip us with a belt." So Hannah ran past Bruce up the stairway and into a bedroom. She woke up Dana. "You gotta help," she said. "Please protect me. Don't make me go back. They're racist and they abuse us."
Yeah, the Harts had lived next door for about 3 months at that point, but the DeKalbs had never seen any children out playing in the yard or anything. They'd said hello to Sarah and Jen, but Jen was especially not friendly.
So soon after Hannah got into the house, the DeKalbs saw flashlights outside and heard voices calling for Hannah. So Bruce opened the front door to tell him that Hannah was there, and then without asking permission, Sarah and Jen came into the house to look around. They ran up the stairs and found Hannah hiding between the dresser and the bed.
Yeah, so Jen took charge of this situation, and Dana was still sleepy, and she agreed to let Jen and Hannah have a minute alone in the bedroom. Then, a minute later, Hannah walked down the stairs, kind of robotic-like. She said nothing and just stared straight ahead. And Jen told her to apologize to Dana, which she did. So, I don't know about this. I'm very judgy today, but if a kid runs in and tells you something like that, you say, wait a minute, I'm going to call the police and sort this out. You're not just going to take her back home.
Well, yeah. I mean, knowing the little that we know.
If we were in their shoes at that point.
It just seems like, if you're in this situation, you would call the police. Here's this little kid coming over, complaining of being abused.
In the middle of the night.
I'd want to have some policeman or someone in authority investigate.
Sure, at least to take a report. Maybe the girl would talk to the police and they could get her out of there.
Yeah.
So Dana said she did plan to call CPS the next morning, but then at 6:30 a.m. the doorbell rang again. And this time she ignored it. It's super early. Then an hour later the doorbell rang again, and this time she answered the door. And she and Bruce were faced with the entire Hart family that morning. The kids were lined up in a row outside the door. And Jen talked to Dana at the door for close to an hour. So apparently Jen was one of these people that once they start talking, it's hard to get away.
Yeah, and plus she's going to be doing some damage control.
Oh, super damage control. It's all, explaining how wonderful she is. She told Dana that the children were adopted and that they'd all been drug babies. She said that Hannah was 12 years old and that her biological mother had been bipolar. So Hannah looked a lot younger than 12, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She's the one with the missing front teeth, too, and she's tiny. But Hannah was actually 16 years old at this point. So it's like she didn't even go through puberty, which can happen with malnutrition.
Well, if you're not nourished, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain amount of calories to be able to go through puberty.
So why wouldn't a doctor be concerned about that,
Hey.
Wouldn't you think?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Here's the other problem. Maybe they told her, the doctor, that she was 12, right? And they don't have records.
Well, I guess when someone brings a kid to you, don't you ask for a birth certificate or anything?
No. You ask for the parents to fill out the form.
Yeah, you're right.
And you look for old records. If I'm dealing with a 12-year-old who's tiny and prepubertal, that's a big different story from a 16-year-old who's tiny and prepubertal.
All these kids were so small, though, Dick. I mean, you've seen the pictures.
Yeah, they were.
These kids were in their teens when they died. They were 12 to 19, and they sure didn't look it at all.
No, they were teeny.
Yeah. So Jen went on to explain to Dana that the kids had been bullied because they were a lesbian couple who had adopted these kids. And she said that they'd moved to Washington because it was the children's dream to grow their own food, raise farm animals, and be self-sufficient, which is kind of a weird dream for 6 children to share.
And they all had the same dream.
Yeah, right. So she told them that Sarah worked as the assistant manager at Kohl's, and she mentioned that Marcus was now 19. And when Bruce said something to Marcus like, oh, you're probably getting ready to leave the house soon, college or whatever, Jen said, we certainly hope he's not leaving. So what the fuck that was about, I don't know. Craziness is all I can think.
Yeah.
So, of course, Dana was still concerned, and she did ask Jen if she could have a moment alone with Hannah, but Jen refused, apparently saying, we do everything as a family. So at the end of the conversation, Hannah was instructed to hand over a note to Dana. This was written by Hannah, but the words seemed very adult, and the note read, Dear Dana Bruce, I stopped this morning because I feel awful about disturbing your peace and worrying you in the middle of the night. I was very frustrated with my brother and didn't handle things very maturely. And I'm sorry for telling lies to get attention. I'm working on being more honest and finding better ways to communicate my frustrations. I've been pretty sad about 2 of our cats dying recently, so I was just very sad and frustrated last night. Thank you for being kind, Hannah. And she didn't write like a 16-year-old either, if you look at the letter.
No.
So these kids weren't being educated. So Dana still had her doubts. But I guess she thought maybe Hannah's just a troubled child who had made up these allegations. It was possible. I guess she still did want to call CPS, but her husband Bruce decided he didn't want to start trouble with the new neighbors. I guess they'd just gone through like a year-long dispute with the previous owner of that house, and Bruce didn't like confrontation. But Dana did eventually tell the story to her elderly dad, and it bothered him, but still he waited 2 months, so I'm not going to give him a medal. And he called 911. He did tell the dispatcher that he was really worried about the children's safety at that point.
Well, at least someone called.
I know, but what do you think about the delay? That's just poor, shitty, not impressive.
Well, yeah, it wasn't. And here's the wife who says she wants to call CPS, but her husband said, no, we don't want to do that. Let's wait. Come on.
Well, there's the other side of the coin here, which I don't really agree with, but that calling CPS set them off. And that's what they were running away from when the crime occurred.
Yeah, possibly.
But what else are you going to do? You can't ignore it.
No.
You can't. So after the elderly dad had called, someone from the sheriff's office did call Bruce and Dana. Dana talked to them and said that there had not been any more incidents, but she was still concerned. The children were always indoors, and the family had bought blinds, so they had closed up all the windows all the time. So she was told, of course, that keeping the kids inside was not a crime, and there was no more follow-up done.
But she was still worried.
Sure.
And she started spending time watching the house next door, so she could see Jen's SUV and Sarah's car coming and going. She spent more time outside working in the yard where she could notice things, and she did notice how the children would walk single file into and out of the house.
Yeah, they were retired, so they were home quite a bit, even though they were very outdoorsy.
And Devante was the only one who did any yard work. The other kids rarely even left the house.
So how weird is this? Because Jen had said they moved to the country to be self-sufficient and grow their own food. How do you do that if you never leave the house? It's all horseshit,
Other than a few brief interactions in their shared driveway, the Harts seemed to be avoiding the DeKalbs. Then on March 15th, 2018, Devante approached Bruce as he was working on his truck. He asked Bruce for some tortillas. He was happy to give Devante what he needed. So that same day, Jen posted on Facebook that it was the 9th anniversary of Devante, Sierra, and Jeremiah's official adoption date. She also posted cute pictures and wrote that she is a better human for knowing her children.
Dick, why are you smashing your headphones to bits?
I am just so frustrated listening to ads. Why can't I listen to my favorite podcasts without those annoying ads?
Well, I can't help you with other podcasts. However, True Crime Brewery now comes commercial-free for our Tie Grabber members.
Huh?
That's right. If you subscribe at any level, you get to listen to all of our new episodes commercial-free. And this is in addition to our bonus episodes each month. Plus, you get some great TCB swag mailed to you when you join.
At least I can listen to True Crime Brewery ad-free. I really wish other podcasts would do that. And Jill?
Yeah?
Do you know where the glue is? No, I just pounded up my last pair of headphones.
On Friday morning, Devante returned to the DeKalb's house. He asked for bread. Dana didn't have bread, so she gave him more tortillas. She said she gave him like a big Costco, package of tortillas. But he continued to come to the house and ask for food, so these kids were not getting enough food. And they noticed that Devante was shorter than Dana, who was 5'4", and super thin. Then, one day, he showed up with a list. He wanted peanut butter, fruits, bagels, cured meats, and he actually used the word non-perishables. So we know that these were foods he was trying to hide from Jen and Sarah. He asked them to leave the food in a box near the back fence where his moms wouldn't see it. So Devante did finally confess to Dana that they were withholding food from him and his siblings. He said that Sarah used to resist the punishment, but now she was going along with it. Devante told them that everything Hannah had told them that night was true. So Dana was taking notes with plans to notify CPS. She wanted to have facts. She wanted to have enough information so CPS would have to respond and do something. So I give her credit for that. That was smart. Devante still begged her not to tell anyone, though. He was afraid that he and his siblings would be split up, which is a valid concern, really, unfortunately. Sure. And he's really in a shitty position for a child. They all are.
Yes.
So on March 23rd, after Devante had come for food at least 10 times, Dana called CPS. And that afternoon, a CPS worker came to visit the Hart home and saw Jen's SUV pull into the driveway. Just minutes later, the worker knocked on the Hart's front door and rang the doorbell over and over again, but no one came to the door. But of course she knew someone was there.
Yeah, she'd seen him.
Yeah. Less than an hour later, Dana saw Sarah's car come up to the house. Then, that evening, Dana saw the red kayak that they always kept on the top of the SUV had been taken off. Then the next morning, the SUV was gone, and blocks from a retaining wall by the driveway were all over the driveway, like someone had driven into it in a hurry to leave. So Dana just thought that they'd gone away temporarily. Of course, she didn't realize that they were running away and had left that house for good. So they're fleeing from CPS.
They were. The worker was there, and she saw Jen's SUV come in, and then nobody would answer the door. So they knew that CPS was out there.
Right, yeah. So the Hart cell phones pinged off towers down the Oregon coast all the way to California. On Saturday morning, Sarah was expected to be at work opening Kohl's at 6 a.m. But at 3 a.m., she texted coworkers that she was sorry, but she was too sick to come in. Then Sunday morning, Jen was caught on a surveillance camera at a Safeway store. She was wearing an oversized hoodie, and she bought about $20 worth of groceries, paying cash for them. She used her Safeway Club card to get her discount, and she bought saltines, cereal bars, bread, some beef ravioli, bananas, and carrots. And people who knew her would remark that she was considerably heavier than they had ever seen her, so she'd put on a lot of weight. And that same day she went and bought 8 toothbrushes and deodorant at a dollar store. So these purchases bring into question if Jen's mind was really made up to drive over that cliff at this point. You know, why would you buy these things if you knew that certain death was coming?
Right, you wouldn't.
So on Saturday night, their SUV's GPS was turned off, and they'd never done that before. In the 9 years they had that SUV, the GPS was always on.
Okay, so it looks like the decision wasn't certain until Sunday, and that's when the kids were drugged, and Sarah overdosed, and Jen got drunk and drove off the cliff. So how complicit was Sarah in these murders and suicides? Searches about Benadryl overdosing and death by drowning were found on her cell phone.
Yeah, and she'd Googled these types of things for a long period of time. She had searched from just after midnight on the Friday they took off until 6:30 p.m. Saturday evening. And both liquid and tablets of generic Benadryl were found in the SUV. It had been purchased in Washington the same day they left.
Yeah, it was estimated that Sarah had taken 42 doses of the medication. I mean, generic Benadryl, 25 milligram capsules, and one of those will be sufficient to help with allergies and stuff. So 42 doses would definitely be an overdose.
Oh, you'd be like comatose. If I take a Benadryl, I'm hungover the next morning.
Yeah, well, it does have that side effect. And if you look at the over-the-counter sleep preparations, they all pretty much have Benadryl or diphenhydramine, the generic.
It's a big racket. I mean, it's way off topic here. But if you go for that ZzzQuil or any of it, it's just Benadryl.
Yeah. The children also had high levels of the drug in their bodies. It seems to be clear that both Sarah and Jen wanted themselves and the children to die.
Yeah, I know. I wonder what they told them when they gave them that medication. That just makes my blood curdle. These kids were between 12 and 19, Dick, so they knew something was up.
Well, they had to.
Yeah. And it just horrifies me to think about what they went through. Did they know this is what was happening? I mean, they'd given them Benadryl for car sickness or whatever before, but these were huge doses, and the kids had to know that. These weren't little kids.
No, I suppose they could come up with some excuse. We need you to sleep for a couple hours or something like that.
I don't know. I mean, I've lost sleep thinking about what happened in that car that day.
Yeah, don't want to think about that.
No, not at all. Of course not. But imagine what people who cared about them, how they deal with it. What about Priscilla? What about Dante, who's had nothing but shit his whole life, really? On Monday afternoon, Sarah had still not returned to work, of course, and she hadn't answered any calls or texts, so a co-worker at Kohl's called 911 and asked for a welfare check on Sarah. Sarah did not miss work. She was a hard-working woman, if nothing else. So it wasn't like her to miss work and not respond to texts. So it was just 2 hours later when a tourist spotted the Hart's SUV upside down on the rocks below a scenic Pacific Coast highway cliff.
Over 100 feet.
Yeah. Definitely no surviving that.
No, and as the wreckage of the SUV was recovered, Jen's body slipped out of the crushed vehicle and fell. The impact from the fall disfigured her face to the point that authorities were not able to identify her. So 3 of the 6 children, Marcus, Jeremiah, and Abigail, were found in the car with Sarah and Jen.
So Jen's blood alcohol level was over the legal limit, and the car's computer would show that Jen had stopped on a gravel pullout about 70 feet from the cliff just moments before the fall, and she had clearly accelerated. She never tried to engage the brakes. There was no braking.
Yeah, now they eventually did find Hannah and Sierra's remains near the wreckage site. Devante's body has still not been found. He has been ruled dead. He was in the vehicle at the time of the crash, and a death certificate was signed for him on April 3rd, 2019. Then 10 days after the crash, the county sheriff announced at a press conference, "I'm to the point where I no longer am calling this an accident. I'm calling it a crime."
Which is really shocking.
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
The mother's with 6 kids.
Right, and if you don't even have any clue anything's wrong, it's a super shock.
Yes.
A forensic pathologist said that the family had died almost immediately after the impact and died from spinal injuries. Investigators went through Jen and Sarah Hart's social media accounts, their phones, and their computers, and one of the last searches on Sarah's phone as they were traveling through Oregon was, "Is death by drowning relatively painless?" Another one was, "How long does it take to die of hypothermia in water while drowning in a car?" So we know that she knew about it.
So it would seem.
The home's interior was described as very neat and orderly, almost clean to a fault, for a family. There was some clothing strewn about, like the family had left in a hurry. But the house had been remodeled too. They had new wood floors and they had recently painted it. The weird thing about this was there were picture frames on the walls, but they were all empty. Don't know why that was. They had left their pets behind, so animal control had to come in and take custody of the pets. A room where the kids had slept had 2 small beds and a mattress on the floor. There was nothing on the walls, posters or anything to personalize it. There wasn't much there to even indicate that teenagers had lived in the house, which is so sad. There were a few board games and some library books. That's about it. Even though they had called themselves vegetarian, the refrigerator was stocked with lunch meat, beef, hot dogs, and chicken. So the images on Jen's Facebook account certainly didn't paint an honest picture of this family.
So Mendocino County Sheriff Tom Allman called a coroner's inquest on April 3rd, 2019, to determine the manner of death of the Hart family. Now, witnesses over the 2 days included people from Clark County, from Washington Sheriff's Office, California Highway Patrol investigators and officers, Mendocino County Search and Rescue, a forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy, and a deputy from Clark County. I think we got things covered there, huh?
Yes, it was a big thing, of course. This is such a tragic thing. So day 1 included interviews from Officer Michael Covington, who was on patrol on the coast on March 26, 2018. Also Dr. Greg Pizarro, who testified that Jennifer Hart had a blood alcohol level of 0.102. So that's over the legal limit in California. Pizarro also testified that Sarah Hart and the children had these high levels of diphenhydramine, which is the active ingredient of Benadryl, in their systems. So a jury of 14 unanimously found that Jennifer and Sarah Hart had died by suicide, while Marcus, Hannah, Devante, Jeremiah, Abigail, and Sierra Hart died at the hands of another person other than an accident, aka homicide.
Right.
So a lot of issues to unpack here. After the deaths, there were several people, mostly Facebook and festival friends, who were defending the Harts. The investigation shows this was clearly a murder-suicide. There was clearly no attempt to stop that car. Jen had accelerated. So why would we feel that Sarah and Jen are deserving of our sympathy? And did they get more sympathy because of how they portrayed themselves? Because they were these middle-class white women who had portrayed themselves so well?
Well, certainly. That's easy. Now, many Facebook friends, festival friends, musicians, they were quick to defend Sarah and Jen after their deaths. Friends and teachers from Jen's high school days posted on Facebook that she was a compassionate, caring person. Well, hell, that's 15 years in the past.
At least they were 38, I believe, when this happened.
Yeah, so 20 years.
Yeah.
Naco Bear, one of Jen's favorite musicians, tweeted that Devante had a history of an eating disorder, which explained his size.
I'm sorry, but fuck you, Naco Bear,
Yeah.
right? And I understand they cared about these women, all right, but it's not like the women just took their own lives and then I would be sympathetic. They murdered 6 children. Murdered them. There's no other way to explain this. So I'm really annoyed with these festival people, if you can't tell.
I had no idea.
Okay.
Now, festival friend and photographer Zippy Lomax told the Oregonian that Jen and Sarah were the kind of parents this world desperately needs.
Oh, really?
Swallow that one.
Holy shit.
Another musician wrote on Facebook that hateful, manipulative news stories and hurtful narratives were being spread on social media about her beloved family. The Harts were known to many of these folks as the Hart Tribe, and even as more information was released about the deceit of both Jen and Sarah and what their children endured, many still continue to defend them. Interestingly, when she looked at her old texts, Zippy was really surprised to see that she hadn't had any contact with the family for about 2 years.
So now we're back to the social media thing. They see a picture and a post on social media here and there and think they know what's going on, when you just don't.
You don't.
No. Nobody puts pictures on Facebook of their most miserable day. It's all about looking good to other people. And that's clearly what Jen did. And most people, of course, don't try to defraud people or lie outright, but still.
No, I mean, you might embellish a little bit.
Everybody wants to look their best, right?
Sure.
But this was just deceitful. So I've thought a lot about why people would continue to defend these 2 people who clearly abused and killed 6 children. One thing I did try and consider was denial. I'm sure there's a certain amount of denial, at least in the immediate aftermath.
Sure.
Another thing, maybe they felt some guilt because they didn't recognize it or do anything to help. Although, when you think about that, if they're just seeing these people at festivals a couple times a year or whatever, not even that much, and they're just Facebook friends, I wouldn't expect them to recognize it. One interesting thing is that these people thought they knew the Harts better than they actually did, of course. And for this, I definitely blame social media. Many of these people who admired Jen and Sarah and believed this was a perfect family, like Zippy, actually rarely saw this family, and they thought they knew them by these frequent posts. But social media doesn't give you the whole story.
Well, no, it doesn't. And just look at this. As Jen was posting pictures of the kids playing outdoors, reading books, and painting, they were actually neglected, punished, and starved.
Yeah, the DeKalbs never saw them outdoors playing or gardening, as many of the posts were suggesting.
Well, they just weren't doing that.
No.
And Jen herself seemed absolutely obsessed in portraying a certain image to the public.
Yeah, so obviously some mental issues there. But overall, the people who never really knew the Hart family at all were angry at Jen and Sarah and heartbroken for the children, as we are. Many recognized Jen as a narcissist and picked apart the staged videos and family photos. And looking back, it's pretty easy to see how staged they were.
Well, when you know the outcome, yeah, it is.
Well, when you take pictures of your kids or your family, it doesn't look like these.
Right.
These are poses. And one example that's been talked about quite a bit is a video Jen posted in November of 2012 on YouTube with the title Thanksgiving Blessings. And in this, 4 of the children sing a song with the lyric, "We are so provided for."
Yes.
That's tough to swallow.
Yeah, and Jen would also post videos of Devante dancing to Joni Mitchell in his underwear.
He's a teenager.
Yeah.
It's not right.
So many of these videos look just staged and exploitive. Another thing you might notice is how their pets frequently change. Like they went through a lot of different dogs and cats.
Yeah, something was really wrong in that house.
I wonder what's going on with that.
Yeah, right.
A woman who worked with Sarah at the Kohl's in Beaverton, Oregon, explained the defenders of the couple, saying, even if someone does something terrible and your view has changed on them, you still have to grieve the loss of the person you thought you knew.
I understand that. I really do. It's just the problem there is that rejecting the reality of the situation is allowing the false narrative power, Jen put that out and it's being perpetuated by supporting that, which I believe is really wrong and dangerous, really.
Yep. So there's an issue that did invite additional criticism, and that's that the children had been taken from their black families and placed with white parents, who were decided to be better for them. And warning signs and abuse claims against the Harts were not acted on as quickly, and they seemed to be given a pass more than once.
Oh, over and over again.
Priscilla Celestine, as an example, had no criminal record at all, not even a parking ticket. Yet she lost custody because she allowed the kid's mother to watch them. And afterwards, as she's working to regain custody, she gets largely ignored. There are allegations that some judges favored non-relative adoptions over placement with family members.
Well, I'm afraid that just seems clear to me that was the case.
In this instance, probably.
Yeah, so if you look at this like a domestic violence case, which it is, the disparity between the Harts' public image and their actual lives is typical of domestic abusers, right? I mean, they have to do that to manage their public profile. So when abuse is alleged, people will have a hard time believing it's true. And Jen was a master at that. One thing I read was that female family annihilators, if they're suicidal, often think they can't leave the children behind. So they might see it even as loyalty to take the kids with them, although it's certainly the sign of a narcissist who's not thinking about the children in any selfless way at all.
Right. Now, there are also financial concerns for Jen and Sarah. They collected about $2,000 a month from the state of Texas. But the children were approaching adulthood, and these subsidies are going to be cut off soon. Marcus, in fact, had already had his subsidy stopped because he turned 19. Sarah made $45,000 in 2017, sole support of Jen and the 6 kids, $45,000. They had about $16,000 in credit card debt, which, considering how much was coming in, that's a significant amount of money to owe.
Sure, I mean, they still were getting some subsidies, but less than $20,000 a year, so it's still not much money to raise that big of a family.
No.
But Jen and Sarah really saw themselves as heroes and martyrs for years, it seems, and each time they were reported to DHS, this image was damaged, and I'm sure that bothered Jen. And each time something happened, what they did is they ran. They ran from South Dakota as a couple, right? Then they went to Minnesota, to Oregon, and then to Washington. And then when they ran to California, either Jen or both Sarah and Jen had made this decision that driving off the cliff was the only way out. And I'm thinking Jen probably convinced Sarah of this, because she was definitely the leader. But here's where the complete selfishness and narcissism is really overwhelming, because instead of facing mistakes they'd made and just taking responsibility, they decided to take not only their own lives, but the lives of these 6 innocent kids. If you look at the adoption and foster care system, the United States does have a history of separating children, especially children of color, from their families. According to a 2018 report, the majority of children removed by child welfare systems are taken not because of abuse, but because of alleged neglect. And in some cases, this is something that can be easily used against parents just because they're living in poverty. The removal of children, which is done in the name of protection, has led to children being placed in the foster care system where they get poor care and no stability. And this system can allow for unchecked abuse, too, because we don't have enough CPS workers to monitor these situations, clearly.
And the Kansas City Star published a 6-part investigation into the foster care system in 2019. They found that despite a 40-year-old federal mandate that prioritizes family preservation, most of the $30 billion, got that? 30 billion, spent each year in the U.S. on child welfare goes to foster care or adoption systems.
Just think what you could do with that money within families.
Right? Even though more children are removed over neglect than abuse, more dollars are spent on investigating families than on helping to keep them together.
Well, judges and officials have used the consequences of poverty, like several siblings sharing a single room, or if the heat gets turned off because they couldn't pay for it, as evidence of child neglect. Also, some parenting choices like leaving an older child unattended at home when you can't afford a nanny or childcare can be held against poor families. And these are things that could be fixed with services that would cost a lot less money and be much better for families and children.
Black families are way more likely to be investigated for abuse and neglect and to have their kids removed from their care. So it turns out that foster care, which was originally intended as a protective system, is actually a risk factor.
Oh, yeah. Do you know how many foster kids end up in the prison system? There's a direct line between the two. So 3 of these 6 kids were Dante Davis's biological siblings, and when the Harts adopted them, they didn't adopt Dante. So like I said earlier, it's not clear if this was the Harts' decision or if Dante did need to be in a mental health facility. But just days after that separation, Dante, 10 years old, tried to kill himself. Then he was in the Texas foster care system for 8 more years. 4 of those years he was in a residential treatment center. And for all those years, until the day his siblings died, he was holding out hope of being reunited with them. Then by the time he was 19, he was in prison. While he was incarcerated, his siblings died, but he wasn't even told about their deaths until after he was released. So Dante's story shows very clearly the failures of the child welfare system. It's so heartbreaking. 8-year-old Dante had acted out violently when the state removed him and his siblings from their home in 2005. Then he was set on a path that advocates call the foster care to prison pipeline.
And the removal of children from their families means that thousands of children are separated from siblings, they go through multiple placements, and they enter adulthood with little or no support. Once in foster care, Black children in particular generally receive inferior services and are kept out of their homes for longer periods of time. Some kids are moved dozens of times over several years.
Well, that's why I said, as white middle-class women, Jen and Sarah Hart were given the benefit of the doubt over and over again. Priscilla made one mistake and never saw the children again. So there's no way to not consider that race played a role here. Remember, Sarah was convicted for child abuse and was still allowed to adopt 3 more kids.
Right. That's pretty much all you got to say.
So it's a messed up system.
About how this system works.
Yeah, I think that final sentence sums it up. So definitely a lot of issues here that we all need to think about.
Yeah, and this was a good time to do it with all that's been going on nationally.
Yep, it does work out that way. So our sources for this episode were the Oregon Department of Human Services records, Sonoma Magazine article by William Callan titled Telling Lies, How a Decade of Deception Led to the Hart Family's Tragic End on the Mendocino Coast. There's Glamour Magazine's Broken Hearts article, which also was made into a podcast. There's an article in the Washington Post titled Abuse, Neglect, and a System That Failed, The Tragic Lives of the Hart Children by Joe Heim and Julie Tate in November of 2018. Also an article online from The Appeal, The Damage Done by Foster Care Systems by Vidya Gulapalli in December of 2019. Also, that study that you talked about from the Kansas City Star, We Are Sending More Foster Kids to Prison Than College, and that was written by Laura Bauer and Judy L. Thomas in February of 2020. That is definitely worth a read. It'll shock you, really.
It will.
It's hard to even read, yeah. If you'd like to send us some feedback, we love to get feedback. You can send us an email to truecrimebrewery@tiegrabber.com, or you can leave us a voicemail on our website, tiegrabber.com. So let's move on to feedback. First, we have a voicemail.
We do. This is from Sarah, and she has a case suggestion.
Hey, Dick and Jill. This is Sarah. I just received an email back from you guys. I had requested a case in Englewood, New Jersey. I wanted to send a voicemail. I'm 887 days clean and sober, so I haven't had a beer. But I did just listen to one of your past podcasts because I'm going from the beginning all the way back to recent ones. And I also wanted to suggest two things. One about a beer that's non-alcoholic. I know Dick had said they had some alcohol, but Heineken just came out with one that's 0.0% alcohol, and it actually tastes like a Heineken. But I'm surprised at how much it tasted like a beer. Also, I had another case suggestion. I grew up around the area of the Iceman. I knew his son, actually, and there's a lot of mafia stuff that went on as kids that we used to hear about, and I always found him so interesting because he was so dedicated to his family, and having his family not know about his horrible life that really started in his childhood, and how he could really separate this horrible killing that he did and be such a wonderful father to his family. He seemed to be. And I know it's not a normal case you do, but he did kill, I think, up to like 200 people, and it was all with cyanide, and it was in a club that I know a lot of people had gone to. Thank you so much for everything. I just became a member, so looking forward to that. Hope to hear more from you guys soon. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Sarah. So, before you and I were a thing, Dick, I enjoyed a Heineken quite often. So I think it's a good everyday beer.
Well, it's not a terrible beer. It's good to drink. And I've seen a few people drinking the zero alcohol one. So it might be worth a try. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be averse to trying a zero alcohol or low alcohol beer for one of the beer reviews.
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea because, a lot of people have had issues with alcohol and still enjoy the taste of a beer. So this case of the Iceman, I have thought about this case because I think that the way that he could compartmentalize his life is fascinating.
It is.
And poisoning deaths,
Yeah, the Iceman, his name is Richard Kuklinski. And he was basically a career criminal, a murderer, a hitman. He was sentenced in 1988 for murdering 2 people. And then while he was in prison, he confessed to the murders of anywhere from 100 to 250 people.
That's hard to believe, huh?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and he said he participated in Jimmy Hoffa's killing.
Wow.
So that makes him suspect right there. He probably didn't. But anyway, he died in 2006, still in prison when he was a 70-year-old. But it would probably be an interesting thing to do the Iceman.
Yeah, I mean, it's not our typical case, but why the hell not? We like to do things differently, of course, sometimes.
That's right.
All right. So I am going to read an email now from Deborah with a case suggestion. Deborah wrote, I've sent a few suggestions of cases that were big in the area of Florida that I live in. I was pleasantly surprised to hear them mentioned. Here's another one that was truly heartbreaking. It's the murder of Cordell Richards. It was done by 3 teenagers, and what they did to this man was unbelievable. Peace, love, and many blessings, Deborah. So she's right to the point. And I know you looked up this case, though. What can you tell us?
Well, this happened in 1999. Cordell Richards was tortured, killed, and set on fire by 3 teenagers. They were ages 15 to 17. One of the teens said Richards was killed because he was trying to have sex with her.
One of them was a woman, a girl.
2 of them are women.
Wow.
One guy. So one of the girls and the boy, who were, I think, a couple, were sentenced to death, and this was later changed to life in prison. And the other teen, who was the 15-year-old, she was given a leaner sentence because she testified against the other 2. And she served 15 years and has been since released. She's out on her own.
And has not been living a life of crime since?
Not that we know of.
Yeah, because I'm always concerned with these crimes done by young people. Are they just evil? Deep down, were they going through a bad time and they can change? It's really a question that's hard for anyone to answer.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Because, we can always talk about the teenage brain, which isn't quite right.
Well, there's all these studies. They certainly can lack impulse control.
So another case suggestion from Amanda. Hello, I'm writing to request a story. Tamla Horsford was a 40-year-old black woman, mother of 6, who was found beaten and murdered during a house party of 7 white women. The story is full of questions, and I think it would be a great episode. I do like the sounds of that. We have been trying to do more cases about people of color, because, we were always falling into this trap of the pretty blonde girl being murdered, so I would like to look into that one for sure.
Well, we can. She was attending a football mom's party. This is also in 1999. Must have been a tough year.
Wow.
1999.
Yeah, there was the Prince song and everything.
Yeah. But this didn't seem like there's anything racial about it. It was a party. There was alcohol served, marijuana. They weren't there with their kids or anything. It's just a bunch of ladies. It looked like they were having a good time. And then the next morning, Horsford's beaten body was found lying face down in the yard. There was an extensive investigation, and it ended up in a finding of accidental death.
Big surprise.
Which has been a much criticized conclusion.
Sure. How do you accidentally get beaten to death?
Well, if she was upstairs and fell...
Oh, but come on, we're beyond that. We can tell the difference between a fall and a beating.
Well, that's what they got right now. So it would probably be a good case to do.
I would definitely like to look into that one.
We will.
Okay.
All right, team.
All right, anything to add?
Just that it's good to be back. I know we had a good time on our week off, but it's nice to be back in the saddle.
It was weird to take a week off. It was only a week, but it felt like a long time.
It did.
It really did.
And that's a good thing.
Glad to be back at the quiet end with you.
I think we ought to do another one later this summer. Take a week off.
Well, we'll probably take some weeks off here and there. Maybe do some extra bonus episodes. We'll talk about it.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time at the quiet end.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.